to Atypical Talk. This is a podcast where we have conversations that illuminate the intersection of faith, culture, and the common spaces of our humanity. I'm Abby.
I'm Joel.
And I'm Kenton.
Yeah, we have a first-time guest on the pod today, Kenton Schreier, our creative arts director at the church. And it's been a long time coming. We're so excited to have Kenton on the pod with us. Excited for you guys to get to hear him and get to know him a little bit more. And he adds a lot to the conversation. So welcome, Kenton.
Well, thank you very much.
So our first question today is, what are you streaming or reading? Joel, what are you streaming right now?
I am streaming the same thing that I talked about probably like a month and a half, 2 months ago at home, mostly. My wife and I are rewatching the show Lost that was on ABC originally. It's started, I think it came out in like 2005. We loved it when it was out, watched it every week, and had Lost parties and had people get together and watch it. It was a whole thing. But we haven't watched it in 10 years. Actually, no, in 14 years. We have not watched it since it ended. So it's kind of been fun to rewatch that. But this is back when TV shows were 24 episodes in a season. Yeah. So we're just in season 3, and it feels like we've been watching it nonstop for months and months and months because they're so long. But we're enjoying that. I'm also streaming on Max, not HBO Max. It's just Max now, right? These little CNN docuseries about presidential races from like the 1800s and 1900s, and it's just been fascinating hearing all these stories and like, oh, it's different, but it's really not different at all at the same time. So I've been enjoying watching some of those, and my wife's falling asleep as I watch those. And then I'm reading a couple things. Our whole staff is reading, and I'm rereading a book by Scott McKnight called A Church Called Tov. Tov is the Hebrew word for good, and it's about church culture and how to not have an abusive culture or a celebrity culture or a culture that leads to toxic things happening, and how to have goodness. Reading that. And then I'm also a couple chapters into a book about sin. Sounds scary, right? It's called Fully Alive by Elizabeth Oldingfield, and she actually goes through the 7 deadly sins that are found in the Bible and talks about how God offers us a way to truly live and to be truly human and to choose differently than those ways of sin like pride and sloth and gluttony and things like that. So it's been fun because it's a fresh take on sin in a really hopeful light. So it's going to be a teaching series we do at the church here in 2025. So
Spoiler.
Looking in that. Yeah, spoiler. I know that you're thinking like, oh, now I'm going to be waiting for like February of 2025. They talked about it. So yeah, that's some of the stuff that I'm in right now.
Yeah. Right now, I'm not streaming a whole lot. I mean, there's a new...
she's so much better than us.
I
haven't
watched TV at all.
TV is bad for you.
There's a new season of Bob's Burgers right now, so like once a week
I take back the hoity-toity thing.
I'm getting one episode of that every week, an occasional Halloween movie because I'm in that mood. Yeah. But I just finished reading a book called The Guide about a guide that works at a fishing resort, and then he's slowly realizing that this fishing resort isn't a fishing resort. It's a weird cover-up for celebrities. Yeah. And so that was really interesting, and right now I'm just waiting for my next book to become available on Libby because everything's like a 30-week wait, and so I'm just sitting waiting around right now.
Your book sounds like like it's going to be an M. Night Shyamalan movie at some point, where it's like you think it's all about this, but no, gotcha, plot twist kind of thing going on. He was dead the whole time situation.
Yeah, no. That's what a lot of my books I read are like, is a lot like M. Night Shyamalan movies. Yeah.
Big twists. It's the best time of the year. It's football season, so our TV is just constantly watching football, or even I'm crazy enough to watch reruns of football. Not like, ESPN classic reruns, but like, oh, I didn't watch that game from last week. So yeah, it's all football. My wife loves it.
Loves it.
It's the best thing she's ever experienced. Saturday is background noise, college football, which I know will make people mad. And then every other night that there's a football game on or some kind of football related thing on, it's on the TV. So yeah, constant, and I love it. I wouldn't trade it for anything. Yep. And then reading, I will continue with the most masculine answer. I read a lot of books about war or fake war or, made up war. If you're familiar with like The Hunt for Red October, Clancy books, Robert Ludlum books, anything like that, I'm reading. I'm reading a really long, like multi-part series book about fictional wars. So it's, riveting and thrilling and
manly,
violent, and then I'm reading some, good for me books, some Peter Eanes books and stuff like that following up. And then I'm also waiting for a book, but more to be released and less like waiting for Libby, but that's the worst.
I hope it's not when you're waiting for it to be released, like a Game of Thrones situation where the author, like, it's been like 20 years and he says, I'm still working on the next book. Yeah. And you also think, like, he's not going to live much longer.
Yeah,
like, that's a terrifying situation.
Yeah.
If you're into
Never
series.
getting that. Never getting that.
Well, our first topic today is a Relevant magazine article titled 4 Lessons from the Early Church That Could Fix the Modern Church. Preston Sprinkle, the author of the article, starts by saying, I often hear Christians say that we should be more like the early church, and I must admit, I've been one of those Christians. But if we linger on how this would look, I wonder how many of us would rather stay put in our 21st century churches. One uncomfortable value trumpeted by the early Christians was their view of the church as a family. The first Christians saw themselves as brothers and sisters and mothers and fathers to everyone who is part of the Christian community. Next, when the New Testament talks about giving, it refers to redistributing money to the poor, usually poor believers outside church walls. Jesus himself said that giving to the poor is one of the main criteria of genuine faith. Third, early Christians were never fascinated with the power of the Roman military. Rather, they clung to the rhythm of the cross, where evil is conquered not by swords and spears, but by suffering and love. Today, it's buried under a pile of caveats and footnotes. We can't really love all our enemies. When it comes to people perceived as threats, most people today prefer justice to grace. Lastly, Christian leaders in the first centuries of the faith mandated a rigorous communal study of the Bible for everyone who became a believer. Every new convert to Christianity spent their first 3 years of the faith studying through the entire Bible so that it seeped down into their bones. This wasn't an option. To become a Christian meant becoming reconfigured through the Word of God. So what did you think of these lessons?
Just on first blush, looking at the different points, I thought, man, how different is it, the PR about Christians and church today? Like if the church today was known for these things, I can't imagine just the different reputation that we would have, and it would be such an exciting thing. I mean, the reality of, the community, it being so focused on community, instead of it being like a big institution or a money grab, which has so much connotations in today's culture, to be like, man, we're here to care for each other and to treat people like our brothers and sisters, no matter what their background is. That's so beautiful. When it comes to money, it's not something like someone's out to get your money, but it's like, no, we are known for our generosity, and we live open-handed, especially to those who are suffering or less fortunate than we are. What a beautiful thing to be known for. And the third and fourth, like the idea of not being obsessed with violence and just sort of opting out of violence and military in a way to like inflict pain or harm to somebody. And then also the idea of, being seeped in the text, letting us like be shaped in our lives and our stories be shaped by the scriptures, is like this culture of like, man, we're going to dive into this so that it shapes how we see ourselves and others and God. So beautiful. And I know, and on that last note, just about reading the Bible, I know so many atheists that know their Bible so much better than Christians do, which is a huge problem, especially when you're trying to understand how your faith can stand on its own 2 feet. So I love it. I just think it's such a culture shock to what so many people think about church and Christianity today. But I think it'd be a good countercultural movement in so many ways. So I'm excited by it. I don't think in any way, shape, or form everybody's batting 1,000 on these things at all. And it takes a lot of courage to speak some of these things and to help create that kind of a culture. But man, that kind of description I could give my life to that. That sounds like something worth giving my everything to, that kind of church, that kind of movement in that way. So I was excited by it overall.
Yeah. What do you think, Kenton?
I mean, I agree. I think I had to actually read the article a couple times because on first, like, just glance and and read through, there's just something about the phrase like, oh, it's better in the past. Oh, let's return to the past, where I felt like, I don't know, I just hear that phrase sometimes and it just brings about feelings of like, oh boy, here we go. We're going to talk about how great, how horrible things are now, even within the church world. So, I read it the first time with maybe a negative mindset, just reading through the things, realizing then once I got to the end, like, oh man, these aren't negative things. Maybe I was a bit more practical about some of them, maybe why, they had to learn the Bible so rigorously was because, not everyone could read. So, the people in power, the people who were leading the church, all of those kinds of things, like they had to know it in and out because they had to be the answer bearers. They had to be the text bearers and all of that. But, some of those things, practicality-wise, are a little bit different. Like, we actually have more financial resource now to give more than they would have back then. Back then, it wouldn't have been all just financial things, but still. So, I had to reread and re-realize that, like, man, we are kind of missing some of these things. And I actually do agree that some of these we could either do better at because we're already doing as a modern church, or we could change and completely revalue how we do things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I really think that a lot of churches can work on it, but I also notice some of these in modern churches as well. I think Bridgeway does well at some of these things, like the, giving to the poor. Not that all of our money goes to people in our community in need, but, a good chunk, 13% goes to people in need in our community. So I think that's really good. And, family, I don't know, like that I kind of push up against just because it can be
manipulative.
Yeah.
Manipulative, yeah. And some people have, you say family as a positive thing, but they hear it as a negative connotation because of some of their broken family things too. But any institution, you talk about family, they're like, are you trying to manipulate me and try to get something out of me? Because, I can hear that as well. But
like at Bridgeway, I feel like all the table groups I've been a part of, even though we don't say, we're a family, it kind of feels like that because we rely on each other and we come to each other when we need something, or if we just want, to hang out with someone. Like I can see us being family in that sense too. And so I don't know. I really like these values.
Yeah, you're not just giving a family a birth, you can create people and form those family bonds that are sometimes greater than, the ones you didn't get to choose.
Yeah. And I think that's some of the opportunity that the church honestly has, church capital C has, is, in a world where people might have some broken family history or not strong family relationships. It's not like we'd ever replace those things or church could replace that, but we all do have this innate sort of God-given desire to be known and to know others. And I think church can create that when it's more than just about the rows that we sit and stand in on Sunday mornings, but more about relationships. We can help create that for people, where people are loved and accepted as they are, and they're on a journey with somebody no matter what. So I think family is a huge thing. And I think a lot of people in our culture, we're experiencing loneliness like never before through studies that we see, and we can actually scratch that itch as a church, as a faith community, which is beautiful.
Yeah, I think beyond just like, you brought it kind of down to the personal, like individual level. I think some of these things, can seem daunting. Like the last point when it talks about, just rigorous reading of the Bible, like how intense that seems as as an idea of just like, devoting every spare moment. Is that what I have to do? Every spare moment I have to read. But I think it can be smaller. It can be asking questions. It can be, honestly, having doubts and bringing those doubts to light. I know, because for me personally, like, I'll read a scripture. Maybe it's even the scripture, the verse of the day on the Bible app. And sometimes I read that and I'm like, oh, that sounds great. But like, I don't really know the context, and everything about reading scripture, especially isolated scripture, is going back and realizing the context. And sometimes, I just end up, I guess, doom scrolling the Bible.
Is it really doom scrolling when it's the Bible? That's an interesting.
No, it's not. Well,
hope scrolling.
Yeah, maybe Revelations or something. But yeah, so like I'll just go and find myself just reading, several chapters sometimes, and then just realize, oh, I was literally just looking for the context of this one verse. So it doesn't have to be, whatever from beginning to end, because how do you know where to start?
Right.
It feels very Star Wars-esque when people tell you where to start. Like, do I start in the middle? Do I start at the beginning? I don't know. So honestly, just asking questions can really start the ball rolling to get, you learning and having a deeper understanding of, who Jesus is through the Bible.
Yeah.
I think on that last point about, the mandating of a rigorous study of the Bible, one of the key words in the article talks about a communal study of the Bible, which I think for me in my journey, like being in a group of people and not doing it on my own has been the game changer, to hear other perspectives and to have people point things out that you just glossed right over. And that's what was really mandated in the early church, was this communal pursuit of God through the text. And Kenton mentioned earlier about some people not being able to read, and that's really where that started. Was there would have to be a group going together and somebody that did have that literacy background to read, but you did it together. And get me on a soapbox about like our Western mindset. It's so individualized. It's all me and God, my journey. But it's really what you see in the early church was our journey, and it was this communal kind of thing. And so I love the idea of people coming together with their doubts and questions, and people not just pacifying that, but like, well, have you thought about it this way or maybe this way? It just feels so much more organic, much more organic than just coming to church and hearing one person give a sermon and that's the end of the conversation. It's really not a conversation at all. So I love the idea of that communal commitment to study the Bible and to get the Bible in us in that way too.
Yeah. Now, I think I had the same pushback that Kenton kind of did about it seeming daunting, but all of these are communal things. And so the fact that I somehow separated that last one was this is an individual thing.
Just shows the water we swim in is much diverse, right? Yeah.
You read communal and you're like, oh yeah, okay.
Yeah. So what would it take for churches to make these changes and look more like the early church, as they're talking about in the article?
My first take on what it would take to make it happen in these changes, I think it takes courage to talk about some unpopular things and to push back against maybe the way things have been done, and ask questions about why have they always been done that way? Is that biblical, or is it just sound biblical, or is it just the way that we saw our parents and grandparents do it? I mean, to talk about violence and had this obsession with the power of the Roman military, and to talk about retribution instead of mercy and grace, that is a bold thing to talk about that's going to ruffle feathers. We know talking about money in any kind of community ruffles feathers and makes people feel uncomfortable, even when you're talking about giving, sometimes especially when you're talking about giving. It takes a lot of courage to talk about these things, and some people in leadership, and I feel this tension from time to time, it'd be easier just to not pitch the ball. It'd be easier not to deal with what would happen if you actually throw that pitch out. So I get that impulse, but it's going to take boldness, and it's going to take sacrifice in some regard, or an imagination to see it differently. I mean, we feel this at our church all the time. Abby, you mentioned that we give 13% of every dollar that comes in back out to our local nonprofit partners serving our community, and also to help start new life-giving churches across our state. And that's a big chunk of money. And as we've grown as a church, 13% keeps getting bigger. It's kind of one of those things too.
Good and
yeah. So but we made that commitment. So there are times when I'm like, man, we thinking the church could use this, but we've already committed this resource in another place. And so I think in a lot of regard, you have to say no to good things to say yes to these bigger things. And I think I feel that tension, but I feel like we're so committed to it that we keep walking in faith to be okay, we can't do this now because we're doing this, and we're helping start this church here, or we're doing this month for this incredible nonprofit serving the poor in our community. So you have to say no to yourself and be kind of self-sacrificial like Jesus is so that we can do this. So it takes courage, it takes imagination, and it takes faith to be okay, God will do more than I can possibly see in this, and God will provide our needs as a church, so that we can actually do what he's called us to do beyond our walls as well. So I think it's a beautiful challenge, but it takes some guts. And I'm not saying that I have it all the time, for sure, because I wrestle with it. But I'm glad to have a good team of leaders and elders and staff around us that help encouraging us to keep moving forward and believe.
Yeah. Our next topic today is a CBS News article titled "Old Ladies Against Underwater Garbage Cleaning Out One Pond at a Time on the Cape." We've all seen it. You're smack dab in the middle of a beautiful place in nature, and you see a piece of litter. Dr. Susan Bauer, an 81-year-old avid swimmer, decided she had seen enough trash at the bottom of ponds in Cape Cod, so she wanted to do something about it. About 4 years ago, she formed a group affectionately called Old Ladies Against Underwater Garbage. They've been pulling trash from some of the 996 freshwater ponds on the Cape ever since. There are a few requirements to consider when joining. First, you have to be over 64 years old. Secondly, you have to be a proficient swimmer and able to pass a test administered by Bauer. To anyone who thinks getting old means feeling old, Bauer and the rest of the group are proving that's just, well, rubbish. One of our secret weapons is we don't care what we look like. We're encased in black stuff. We can drag stuff out of the pond. We are past the stage where vanity matters, said Bauer. So what do you guys think of this story? I loved it. It just showed up on my Facebook one day, and I figured we had to talk about it.
The algorithm sent you something, the great almighty algorithm sent you something positive.
Yeah, positive.
Yeah,
beautiful. Man, that's a story in and of itself.
Yeah.
I love it. No, I love this story. I feel like we share these stories on the pod from time to time. And a couple, themes from this story that really stuck out to me. One was, here's somebody who's maybe in what we call the third act of their life, in their early 80s, who is not just concerned with using all their time on themselves and what they want to do and just relaxing and not being productive. For Dr. Susan Bauer, it was about so much more. And so I love the reality that she's using this act and still bringing good into the world and helping people, serving people in this way. And I just love stories when, the narrative is usually, oh, now it's time for somebody else to do something, or, oh, that's a problem and I want to complain about this problem, but I don't want to do anything about it. I always love stories that you hear somebody who sees a problem and they actually step up and they do something about it. And I just love that. I'm always encouraged by that. I want to grow in my, maturity as a person and as a Jesus follower to where when I see something that's wrong, I want to not ask the question like whose job is it and point out at other people, but like if I'm struggling with it, maybe God wants me to do something about it.
Yeah.
Not just pray about it, but become the answer to the prayers that I'm supposed to do something about it. And I love that she probably didn't have all the answers to the question of how to fix it, but she just got her hands dirty and started doing something. So way to go, Old Ladies Against Underwater Garbage, which I feel like I'm glad that they titled it that and that wasn't our title for it, because I'd be offensive if I was saying that. But I love that so much.
Yeah. So how would you hope stories like this inspire change?
I mean, I just see this story and I just see, like Joel said, people like towards the end of their like working careers, trying to figure out like what is next for me, and just realizing that like there's always something more that can both be fun but also like productive. Yeah. And I mean, I know for me personally, my wife and I count down the days to retirement, but also not because we just want to sit and do nothing, or play golf all the time or any of those kinds of things, but like we truly think that we can have time for our families and our lives, but also dedicate it to serving in places where we feel like there are needs that we just don't have the time to do, because we really value like volunteerism, but it's just, I mean, it's difficult to find time, in a small family with a 1.5-year-old. So I hope that stories like this, people can see these ladies having a great time, and also using a great time and something that they really enjoy, but somehow using that in a way that like betters their community. Honestly, whether people pay attention to this or not, like who knows if, I mean, anybody sees them do this. I mean, 996 freshwater lakes, like that's a chance that nobody sees this. They're not doing it for the glory of it. They're doing it because it's fun. They like to swim. You know, they swim a new spot, pick up trash.
Yeah. I think for me, it sort of just piggybacking what he said about how I hope it inspires change, is you do see it's fun. You saw for Dr. Susan Bauer, she was an avid swimmer. So here she is. She already has a passion for something, and she enjoys doing something. And what she's doing is channeling that passion into doing something good for the world and cleaning something up and being productive and serving other people. I think sometimes we think the only way we can like make a difference is if we, you know, leave and go to Africa or become a missionary in some place. And that's how we make a big difference. And that's how we actually do things. And it sounds like just sacrifice and suffering, which there is an element of that with everything. But I love that she used something she was already passionate about, something that was fun for her, and she just channeled that into some positivity and into serving other people and making the world a better place. I think there's a lesson in that I hope inspires us, that if you like golfing all the time, start a benefit for something, do a tournament, you know what I mean? Like every now and again, or like, you know, those things that you enjoy doing, how can you bring beauty and good out of it instead of like being like, oh, I'm going to go and do this on Saturday and I hate everything about this and I'm dreading it. You know what I mean? When you come in with that attitude, I don't think that that's going to actually bring the beautiful thing that could possibly happen, as long as you are thinking, I'm good at this, I like this, how can I use this, and how can God use this for good? So I hope that inspires people. Like, what do you already like? What do you enjoy doing, and how can you channel that for good in the world that goes beyond just you?
Yeah,
and I think that's
absolutely.
A cool lesson in that for me.
Yeah. So on the topic of this, what is a time-consuming hobby that you think you'd like to get into after you retire? And it doesn't have to be something that's good for the world, I guess, but...
Oh, mine's good for the world.
Oh, okay.
It's rock and roll. No, I'm just no, I honestly, I've thought about this a lot in recent months, just because I am a musician. I love music, and I love it so much. I love live music, but I don't have a creative outlet with other people. So, like, I dream about starting a dad rock, or let's just be real, it'd probably be a grandpa rock band is really what it would be by the time I get around to it. But just like having a few friends who are like, hey, we got I want to learn these 10 songs. Can we learn how to play these 10 songs? Because it's one thing if I can sit down and learn how to play a guitar part by myself, but like hearing it with bass and drums and singing, it's a whole different thing. So that creative collaboration, when my wife hears this, she's going to be like, oh, I'm not ready for that much noise coming from the house.
She's like, separate houses after retirement. I can't do that.
But just like the idea of like, I always love to play that song and I've never had an outlet for it. And you know what? We'll do a benefit concert for something.
Yeah,
that's what we'll do. That's how that works.
Well,
that's how that works.
Spin it,
yeah. So that's what I'm thinking about. And I'm thinking about band names already. Something about
you've got some good ones in the past.
Our backs hurt. Yeah, they'll be better than some of the cheesy ones from the past. No, they'll be cheesy in a whole different. It's gonna like you heard of dad jokes, granddad jokes, or even worse, probably. Yeah, for sure.
What about you, Kenton?
Well, honestly, I should probably just buy like a book that's like 1,000 hobbies for dummies or something. I don't know. Like I said, my wife and I talk about it a lot, but I just think about like, man, all this time, like, what am I going to do? So I'd probably get into like a million different hobbies, honestly. Similar to Joel, I mean, we're both musicians. I really, for the last several years, have wanted to start building guitars. But man, it takes so much time. And so I just do not have the time to devote to that. I mean, I've built them through parts and things like that before.
From scratch.
But from scratch,
Oh,
like
that'd be so
like
cool.
woodworking and all of that kind of stuff. It's just stuff I really enjoy.
You're making a Kenton caster?
Yeah. I mean, I did name my son after the inventor of the electric guitar, so I have to continue it.
Yeah.
But yeah, I really would love to do that. And just like Joel, I'll spin it to be, a philanthropist. I'll do the like Orange County Choppers thing and just like make guitars for organizations and be like, here you go.
There you go.
That would be great. I think I'd really like to just get an RV and travel. I think that would be so cool to be able to just travel the U.S., Canada, wherever I want to go, not have to worry about putting in vacation time. You know, I can take a month or two at a time and just travel. That would be great. And then I can take my dogs with me too.
So good.
That'd be a game changer.
Yeah. So I think that would be really cool, but RVs are kind of expensive, so I think I need to figure out a better retirement plan. to be able to have money for that.
Just put a little bit away every week, right? This is for the RV dreams.
Skip the Starbucks every week.
That would make a dent, I'm sure.
Our last topic today is a Time magazine article titled "Everything to Know About the Second Trump Apparent Assassination Attempt." Just 2 months after an attempted assassination of former President Donald Trump in July during a rally in Pennsylvania, another apparent attempt on the Republican presidential nominee's life was foiled by authorities on Sunday at Trump International Golf Club in West Palm Beach, Florida. While Trump was golfing, a Secret Service agent noticed a man, later identified as Ryan Wesley Ruth, a 58-year-old living in Hawaii, holding a rifle an estimated 400 yards away, poking out of a tree line near the golf course. As Secret Service personnel opened fire at the gunman hiding in the bushes, the gunman dropped his weapon and other items. A witness reported seeing Ruth flee the scene. Authorities were able to pull the vehicle over on a highway around 3:30 p.m. on Sunday. "We did not give him an opportunity to put up a fight. We had him contained, forced off the road, taken out at gunpoint," Martin County Sheriff William Snyder later told the media of the arrest, adding that the suspect was unarmed, relatively calm, and not displaying a lot of emotions when he was stopped. The earlier witness was brought in to confirm the suspect was the same person seen fleeing. So what was your reaction to hearing about this?
It was first like, oh my gosh, again? And then it was some anger and some sadness and just exasperated by the whole situation to think like, oh my gosh, it's just been 2 months since the first assassination attempt in Pennsylvania, which was so jarring for us as a country. And then to think that, again, someone is taking their anger and their angst all the way to thinking I need to perform violence and through an assassination. It just breaks my heart, and I hate that our kids are growing up in this kind of a culture as well. And then I also just get to like thinking about how violence just doesn't work. It doesn't get the job done, and how pointless this way of thinking actually is. To think that, oh, this person who's running for president, they think there's such an existential crisis to not only our country but to our lives and our livelihood, that they would go so far to think I need to assassinate them and murder them for good, like sort of twisting it, thinking like this is for good. And I just think it doesn't work. It won't work. Like if somebody would assassinate a presidential candidate, do they really think that the movement would be dumbed down and there'd be less of that movement? No, it would embolden that. It'd make it have more fervor and more passion than ever before, because violence just doesn't get the job done. Violence doesn't work that way. And I of course, I believe that because I'm a follower of Jesus, and Jesus, when he came to change the world, he didn't send in the tanks and he didn't take over Rome by assassinating Caesar. This isn't what he did. And he turned the whole world upside down through love and mercy and kindness and grace. And I just see that it doesn't work. And I wish people could see that as clearly as I feel like I do in these moments, because I think that there would be less people up in arms, literally, about one presidential election. So sad about it, and then just sort of frustrated that people think that violence is the thing that's going to get the job done.
Yeah.
There's just no place for political violence in the U.S. or, frankly, anywhere in the world. And, there's just been a history of that here, although it might seem like this is the only time it's ever happened. There's a nice long history of horrible political violence in our country and outside of this, and it's just a big sigh of what in the world is happening. It just, to me personally, doesn't make sense why that would be our answer to everything, why our default answer is to permanently remove a problem from the world in that way. It isn't the answer. It's not going to lead to what you think it's going to lead to. It's just horrific to continue to see things like that, regardless of rhetoric that's spoken about either political side or anything like that. Like, you can't use words and take words and turn them into real, like, physical weapons that just aren't the same. sticks and stones, man. Like, truthfully.
Yeah. So why do you think there's been such a rise in political violence over just the past few years?
Overall, I think that people are finding more and more of their identity in their politics.
Yeah.
And when people find their identities in this tribal Republican Democrat thing, and when people that are Republicans or Democrats are talking in ways like, this is the most important election ever and our country's at stake, that rhetoric is so high and people find their identity and their purpose in who their candidate is. I think people think it's an existential crisis, so they'll justify doing horrific things because they think it's the right thing.
Yeah.
And I think we've just seen that over the last 6 to 8 years of people being so entrenched in, like, their first name is the person they're voting for. And the first name of my enemy is the person that they're voting for. And they see things in black and white, good and evil. It's really probably easy for people to go to violence. Most violence in our world history has been because people are convinced that they're right and the other people are going to do evil if they don't do something about it. And so I think that we're living in a time where people's partisan politics are almost a religion for them, and people will do bold things, horrific things, good things, and evil things in the name of their religion if they think that God is on their side. And I think we've seen that because people get so entrenched in it to where they feel like this is a crisis, and if I don't act, then everything's going to hell in a handbasket and our country's done with. And when you raise the stakes that high, when you think one person is going to take the whole thing down or one person is going to save everything, I think people will resort to violence because they think it's the right thing to do.
Yeah.
Which is, it's just, in my opinion, so short-sighted. And it's like we've been talking about, it's not going to get you where you think you're going to go, especially if you're a follower of Jesus. I think there's just different ways we've got to look at these things. Like, no candidate is going to come in and save everything, and no candidate's going to come in and thwart God's plan. God is not up in heaven on his throne being like, oh, I hope this person doesn't win because then I'm in trouble. That's not how it works. And I think sometimes we think that God is anxious about this and we need to do something for God because God can't do it himself. Yeah. And I think when you start stepping in to do things on behalf of God, you sort of act like you are God, and it leads you in a really devastating place.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think, a rise in political violence, I already said, there's been political violence throughout, the history of the U.S. I grew up in a house with a father who was a government teacher, an econ teacher, as well as a PE teacher. It's
classic
little things.
Trio.
Classic. But yeah, so I've been, in deep discussions with my dad every time I see him. Basically, we talk politics, and it can get heated or it can just be neutral. But so I love conversations like this. But there's a reality of you get the most impact as like as a candidate by enraging people. I mean, honestly, not just like getting them kind of like upset about a topic, but honestly, like fully enraged. It's the same thing when you log on to Facebook, and you go and you look at the comments of something. It's going to be the loudest voices are going to be the anger. Read any Kokomo Tribune article for us locally, and you'll just see frustrated people. That doesn't mean that there aren't non-frustrated people, but that's the easiest way to get people like to move on what you care about as a political candidate or what you say that you care about.
Fear is a great motivator.
It is the motivator because honestly, we do live in a culture where we're just going to sit back and kind of let it happen. But like I said before, you have to realize that they're just words. Like, yes, they might be there might be fear, there might be anger or a spoken injustice about a topic, and it might be worthy of those feelings, but like your goal should be the polls. Like your goal should be to vote that change, however you see, whatever side, you feel like is the best for bullets, you and your neighbors.
Mm-hmm.
Bullets or ballots, not bullets, right?
Yes,
that's the
absolutely.
thing. There you go, vote, right?
Yeah. And it's just, it's the fear that's happened throughout any assassination that's happened, in the United States or attempted assassination. It happened with the reason that like World War II started, was just anger and, a rage that just people took too far. And I think we see that because people, like Joel said, just get so invested and like that this is the end. And it's not, because this and worse with actual, assassinations have happened before.
Yeah.
And 4 years later, 8 years later, we do it all again with a different candidate, with a different group of people, with, honestly, the same policies we're talking about the whole time, but like, there's a reset. And I know we get scared and we say like it's the end of the democracy, but like the U.S. has been a democracy for a long time, and that is, frankly, unusual that we've been able to maintain this democracy over world wars, over civil wars, all these kinds of things, and we're still here, and we're still chugging along, we're still living life, for us, and ultimately, like, it's not worth getting that worked up about.
Mm-hmm.
Like it affects us from that level so little in our day-to-day lives. Like, vote for the person that you feel like, helps you and helps your neighbors, and vote in your local elections, because things change locally
A lot more, probably.
way more important there than, president. And then in 4 years, if you didn't like the person, guess what? We get to start over.
Yep.
Like it's all new again. So I just think, it's just words, and we got to just realize those words, they're there for a reason. They're there to rile us up, but like it's time to cool off a little bit.
Yeah, I think overall, especially if you're listening and you're a follower of Jesus, like, be involved, vote for the vision of the country you want for you and your kids and your neighbors and those who are less fortunate, but chill out. Like, chill out. Understand that, like, God's still on the throne, and we've been through a lot of this stuff before, like Kenton said, and we're still here. So don't let the fear-mongering drive you to these dark places. And I think if we could have a better hold on that and our perspective, we would experience less political violence, and maybe we would create some more beautiful things in the world and have better relationships with our neighbors if we just did that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, that's it for this episode of Atypical Talk. If you have any questions or topics you'd like us to talk about, you can email those to atypicaltalkpod@gmail.com. You can follow us on Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok at Atypical Talk Pod to get updates when new episodes are out or to get some behind-the-scenes looks. You can also subscribe on your favorite podcast platform to get updates as well. We hope that these conversations today have helped you think wider, love deeper, and partner with God to bring the up there down here in your everyday life. Thanks for listening.